All right, everyone, we are here with a very special guest. We are joined by Jennette McCurdy. Her new memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, is out now. We have read it, and we are so excited to talk all about it. Thank you for joining us, Jennette.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be talking with you guys.
I finished this in a day. I flew through it. I was so like,
oh my God.
It was great, and it was eye-opening to so many things, because I do think Rhea and I are definitely in that age group of, massive, we watched iCarly, like that's our, we're 25 and I'm almost 28. So that's, we're in that world, and you think like, oh, I was 13 and watching these shows, and I just thought that this girl was her character. I just assumed that that's just who she was, like in real life.
Yeah.
And I'm reading your book. I'm like, oh my God, kids are so stupid.
Right. Exactly. And I think that, obviously as we grew up, you start to hear rumblings about things, the media, the articles, whatever, things come out, right? And you're like, what do we believe? What do we not believe? But then you give us this, and we're like, all right, now we're getting the facts, and everything is just like laid out on the table. And obviously the title, like when people first hear it, they're like, whoa. But I also thought it was fucking awesome. Like I thought it just was like, boom. Yeah. Just lets you know what this is going to be about.
Were there any other working titles you guys had, or did you know that this is what you wanted to name your book?
I knew that's what I wanted the title to be. There were never any other considerations. And I also, when I initially showed it to my lit agent, he was like, let's see what the publishers say. Like, here we go. And my editor at Simon & Schuster was the first person who read the proposal, and he was so on board with it, which just was so validating, because I was concerned that no one would want it and think like, oh, I'm not getting a book with that title. But to have him be so supportive and totally get it and be drawn in because of it was very validating and fulfilling.
I mean, that's how you rope people in. Like if you really want people to know what's going on, that's how you rope them in. And so you've been talking a lot about this book, and I'm curious how the press has been for you, because you're doing different podcasts, interviews. How has that been for you? Because you did talk a lot about in this book about how
stepping away.
You were stepping away. Yeah. You were done with acting as a kid. You kind of just like didn't really want to be in front of the camera, and you're doing all this press. So how are you feeling now doing all of this?
Well, that's such a considerate question. I appreciate that so much. I was definitely nervous going into the press, like beforehand. I kind of saw the schedule, and I felt like, okay, I want to make sure that I had like a therapy session specifically for how I can show up and be myself and not feel like I fall into reverting to who I used to be in press, which felt very much I'd make myself smaller, and I'd just kind of like giggle a lot and not really say anything, and just kind of have a smile plastered on my face while I'm chucking whatever the thing was that I was trying to be selling. Mm-hmm. But it is refreshing to be talking about something that I care about, that I'm passionate about, because I don't have any there's no like stock soundbite that's been filtered through network executives and 8 rounds of people and had a million drafts before I just kind of like utter the soundbite. Now it feels very much more connected, and I feel like I'm able to be present, which is a relief. But I will say, initially the press that started coming out was a lot of headlines, and the headlines were very stressful. Like the headliney stuff, I felt like, oh God, I was crying in my bed one night just thinking like, God, I really tried to put my whole soul into this book, and to feel like that wasn't really being acknowledged, and it was more just like the clickbaity headline aspects were being acknowledged. It was disappointing. But then this amazing thing happened where it shifted, and people started reading the book and connecting with it, and it completely changed, and it stopped becoming about the headlines, and it became more about people connecting with it. And that was so touching to me. And it was great to have that after having the low of like, oh God, it's just going to be these headlines and the feeling of disappointment. But it was definitely an emotional.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do think that is a big part. You see that a lot with memoirs, that you want to sell books. So the weeks leading up, excerpts are sent out, and a lot of times those excerpts are some of the juicier stuff, and you don't have the full context because it's only a paragraph of the story.
Right.
And then, those get turned into those headlines, and nobody's even read the book yet.
But then the book came out, and
Yeah.
I saw the exact change that you saw, because I did see all those headlines right before the book came out, and we knew you were coming on the show, and so I was obviously reading those articles. And then once the book came out, I saw a lot of TikToks coming up on my page that were talking about the title of your book and the things, not just about Nickelodeon or whatever, but the things about your mom and the things you went through very personally, that I saw so many people writing, like, I am so happy that somebody is so openly talking about their relationship with their mom. Like, I have a relationship with my mom like this. And people think you're nuts that you could feel this way towards your parent, but like sometimes that's just how you feel. And so I saw that conversation happening more, which I thought was exactly why you would, write something like this, is to not only is it a therapeutic experience for yourself, but also for other people to be like, wow, I went through the same thing and I know I'm not alone. And like, it's okay to feel a certain way towards your parent.
Oh my God, I've heard from so many people. First off, I love TikTok. TikTok, just the TikTok is just lovely. But a lot of people approach me and say, like, my mom's still alive. I can't say this about her. I've been waiting for somebody to say something like this, and it means so much. And those people are the ones that I sort of squeeze the tightest and pray not to catch COVID from, because they're just so nice. And I do feel like it's something that's that needs to be talked about. And I'm glad that some conversations are happening around, parental and narcissistic abuse.
Right. And this is a question I have for you, and considering all of that, is like I mentioned, some people saying, I felt like I could never, like somebody saying to you, I feel like I can't say, my mom's still alive and I feel like I can't say this about them. Did you think that while you were growing up, you were like, this is my mom, I can't feel this way about her? And then like, when did it shift to realizing like, oh no, this person is actually terrible to me, and you know what, she was my mom, but I need to just see it for what it is?
Yeah, that's sort of the arc of the book, because now looking at things in retrospect, I have such a different perspective on it. But when I was little, I idolized my mom and put her on this pedestal and clung to the pedestal that I had her on, because my identity was revolved around her and her being on that pedestal. But now I think when I first started to have like an inkling that, oh, this isn't healthy, or this isn't normal, or this isn't right, I think I was probably 11, and it's when my mom taught me an eating, she taught me calorie restriction, which very quickly led to anorexia. And now I think that was when I started having that like itch of that pull, that tug of, oh, something's off, something's wrong. But I wasn't able to put that into words, certainly. And I also wasn't even able to really face that thought myself. Anytime I had any thought that was even slightly negative, or that removed my mom from that pedestal at all, as a coping mechanism, I would just tamp it down. I would just shove it away. I'd just, ignore it, because it was too scary and threatening of a thought to confront.
It's the way you tell this story is so interesting as well, just stylistically. And I'm curious of how you made that decision, because most of the time you read a memoir and you're reading someone telling their story from where they are right now. Like, this is what happened, and I did this, and here's how it went, and so on and so forth. This almost reads like fiction, because you're telling it as each age, as you get older. It's like, now I'm 11 and my mom has taught me to do this. It feels very present. Why did you make that decision to tell it that way?
I'm so, you guys are great. I'm so glad you asked. Seriously, like, I really appreciate it. I feel like it's too easy to like wax poetic or get too grandiose and like philosophize about things. If I were coming from now, I'd be like, back when I was 6 and my mother, it's just like, why do I start talking like in a British accent, completely different than I actually okay? So I thought it would keep the writing grounded. And I also think that naivete is really funny. Like, trauma, if you're just like exploring trauma, if I were exploring trauma from my point of view now, it would read so different. But also, I don't think the funny would be captured, because to me, the funny comes from that naive, not knowing that you're in a traumatic surrounding, where you're just like, oh, the boys are playing Nintendo 64 and mom's chasing dad with a knife. Like, it's normal, and the normalcy and the sense of, oh, this is just another Tuesday. I think there's a lot of humor there. So I was hoping that would help with humor. And then also, you mentioned that it kind of reads like fiction, and that was also an important piece to me, was that I wanted it to just read as a good book and not like this, overindulgent memoir where it's just goes on and on. I really wanted to keep the pace good. I wanted it to read entertaining, and I hope that's what happened.
Yeah.
Definitely did.
Yeah, I love that you have like such a great sense of humor and that you wanted it to be funny in a way, because it is a lot of dark,
objectively not a funny topic.
Objectively not funny, but I do love when people are so honest and make these things like about their lives funny. I think it makes other people who go through the same thing feel very comfortable to joke around, and people use that as like a coping mechanism.
Yes.
But I'm sure there was a part of your life where you're like, this just isn't funny anymore.
I was a very serious child. Like nothing, I took everything so seriously, and I was very rigid and very sort of like furrowed brow all the time and stiff. But I do think my sense of humor, like honestly, was only birthed when my mom was ill for the first time when I was 2, and then she got cancer again when I was 18. And that's when I started seeing things as funny in a way that I hadn't before. I think just because I needed to. I think otherwise I just would have been curled in a ball crying. It would have been too difficult to handle the circumstances around me. So I think then was when I started kind of establishing a sense of humor, and my brothers were all very funny, and we were all able to laugh through a lot of the tragedy without making light of it, just the humor that was happening very vividly right in front of us.
You write your story and you talk about your mom, and your mom is no longer here, but you do include, like you said, your family, your siblings, your father, all of these people. What was their reaction to you kind of letting it all out there for the world to read?
My brothers are great. I actually just saw them yesterday. We all went to Disneyland.
Amazing.
We were staying at the Disneyland Hotel, and we just went around the parks and just to kind of celebrate. And they've been so supportive throughout the writing of it and the release of it. And they've just always been a constant source of love and support. So I've been really grateful for them. And also they have a sense of humor about all of these things as well. So there wasn't any element of like, ooh, you're saying what now? It was just they got it. They were laughing along.
Yeah. Now, have you ever thought about what your life would have been like if it never went down the path of acting or getting into entertainment? Like, do you feel like your mom would have acted differently, or do you feel like all those things would have appeared in different ways?
I think there was no not acting with my mom. I think she had her sights set on, if I have a daughter, I'm going to shove her in the showbiz and slap those white strips on her teeth and get her an agent and call it a day. And I just think no matter what, she would have found some way of sort of shoehorning that in. But I do think about that sometimes. I do think about what life would have been like without any sort of acting. But there's been this cool switch that's happened. Honestly, I only think through the writing of the book, but where I've been able to look back on the past and say, hey, I'm really grateful because it put me here, and it led me here, and it led me to the people that are in my life and the friendships that I've made and the career that I now have. And so it all kind of feels like, well, yeah, there were a lot of obstacles, but it all did put me on the track that I'm on now, and that's a track that I'm happy to be on.
Yeah. And you mentioned all the clickbaity headline stuff, which is obviously part of the book, and what a lot of people keep talking about, because it's something that I think people and like Fran had mentioned, we were kind of waiting for as people who grew up watching Nickelodeon.
Right. It's a fascinating element of the era where it's like we were such big fans, but we want to know. You want to know what was actually happening.
Right. And there were always rumblings. Like, I remember when YouTube started to become really popular. I remember being, I don't even know how old I was, but it was definitely around the same time that the shows were still airing and like YouTube was like becoming popular, that I was watching YouTube videos on this, so-called creator and like other things where I'm like, okay, like, feeling very confused.
Wait a second, you're taking the rose-colored glasses
feeling
off
very
a little
confused.
Bit.
Like, at 1 second the TV's right next to me and Nickelodeon's on, and I'm on the computer at the same time watching a YouTube video about what's happening behind the scenes, and you're like, this this isn't coming from nothing, right? Like this has been going on for as long as Amanda Bynes and all that, and that's been going on, which was a long time ago. When you decided that you were going to include some of these things in this memoir, what was that feeling like? Because I'm assuming it had to be a little bit scary in some way.
So everything, the emotional arc that was most important to me was my mom, of course, my relationship with my mom, and the book's divided into before and after. It's of course before she died and after she died. And so everything that, I don't do a ton of outlining, but I like did the broad beats of what I wanted each vignette to be. It's divided into 90 something vignettes. And each vignette that ultimately made it only serviced the arc of my relationship with my mom and I, and what eventually becomes my sort of breaking free and my independence from her. I remember I think we cut, probably a dozen vignettes from it just because I liked them. I thought they were entertaining, but they just didn't fit the emotional thrust of the story. So anything that stayed only serviced that thrust. So I did feel like, okay, this is the right approach because this is the most meaningful thing for me to explore, and anything else was just extra or somewhat irrelevant. So what wound up on the page, I did feel like ready to be out there,
Right. And you thought it was crucial to the story that you were telling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Much cleaner, quicker way of saying what I spent.
I really liked reading about also that connection with Miranda and how that all sort of started, because like I said, watching, for me, you guys are, I'm watching TV, I'm like, you guys are my A-list celebrities, right? And like this is A-list celebs.
Yeah.
And to hear you kind of be like, she asked me for my AIM and it was something I didn't even have. And like you guys would message back and forth. I'm like, oh my God, that's how I met my friends.
Yeah.
Like it was really cute. And I do feel like that kind of where she jumps in and out of the story definitely fits like where you were going with it all as well. And it was just cool to see like that friendship evolve. And like she didn't pop in as like, oh, my co-star Miranda. It was like, oh, my friend Miranda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
How is your friendship with her evolved, you would say, now?
So this thing happens in your 20s. I'm curious if you guys have experienced this. But
Absolutely. I can already assume what you're saying, yeah.
You know what I'm going to say?
Yeah.
Where it's like your friendships that you think when you're 20 years old, you're like, these are my the friends that will be on my deathbed, will be playing bingo and clutching each other's hands and watching Jeopardy. That shifts. Yeah. And sometimes you can't even really make sense of it. It's just like, oh, wow, I haven't talked to that person in months.
Right.
And then there's kind of complicated feelings around it. But I mean, I love her to pieces, but we're not as close as we used to be, but it was just totally a natural, I guess, aging.
Yeah. I mean, things get in the way. People's lives change. People focus on different things. I feel like that happens all the time. And definitely there are people that I thought I was going to be friends with forever that it wouldn't be weird if I talked to them now, but I just haven't talked to them in a little bit.
Yeah. I actually just had that experience recently where I saw, I did like a little girls trip and saw some friends that I have not seen in a long time, but we were like, when I do see them, time
feels like
it's like a time machine. You feel like exactly it could have been years, but it feels like no time has passed. And I think that is how a lot of female friendships kind of change as you get older, but you can kind of fit back into that.
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts of maybe I could do it when she approached you when they started to discuss a reboot? Or were you always like, nope?
No. So I say in the book sort of that it was a simple decision, and it came from this place of what serves my mental and emotional health, and that really is the first thing that I run my decisions through, just because there were so many decisions that were not run through that filter, and it really, I know what those consequences are, and so it sort of is simple in that way of just, okay, does it help that, and if it doesn't get past that first line of defense, there's no chance.
Yeah. It's just you taking control of your own life and making that decision like, you know what, no, I don't want to be on this show, and it makes sense. There was something that was brought up in this book and also in Josh Peck's memoir, and we had him on the show and we talked a little bit.
I love Josh Peck.
We love Josh.
He's awesome. He came on the show. We talked about his memoir, and you learn a lot of interesting things. And something that was brought up was you mentioned like the pet, like when we keep going back to like us watching you guys on TV, and I think that's the best way to reference it is like you think that you guys are like billionaires,
right? You build
like,
up this.
You're like, oh my
ideal,
god,
yeah.
They are like they have it so made, yeah. Like they are just they're set for life and whatever. But you guys actually really didn't get paid as much as one would think for all the time that you were putting into this show as a young person.
No, absolutely. You know, there's also a lot of pay differences around what network a show is on. Whether or not you get residuals has a lot to do with it.
That was our most mind-blowing fact. We're like, they don't get residuals.
Yeah,
these shows are on TV constantly.
They're on Hulu. They're on Netflix now. I mean, how do you feel about people going back and watching, you know, iCarly and Sam and Cat now? Like, do you feel fine with it, or are you kind of like, you know, that's just like it just wasn't me, and you wish that it wasn't being brought up again all the time?
No, I mean, of course, I hope people watch whatever tickles their fancy.
Yeah.
Where is that saying from?
Yeah. Tickles their fancy.
You're right.
Yeah. I say that all the time.
Right. What I say the other day, I said till the cows come home. So but no, I hope people watch whatever suits them. But also, I will say there's this tremendous feeling of relief and appreciation that I have now with the book, and the people who are approaching me now. It's completely about the book, and it does feel like a way different experience. People will share some of their story or say something that they connect with. You know, I mentioned the thing about people talking about my mom's alive, I can't say this, thank you for saying this, or people talking about their experience with eating disorders. And it just feels like there's such a different level of humanity there and emotional connection. And that's something that I crave. And so to have that with people now who approach me is a complete 180 from before. And I really appreciate it.
Do you wish some of the people you worked with would open up and speak out about some of the things that they saw and experienced? Like, does that frustrate you at all?
I just own my experience, and I've tried. I feel like that's the best approach for me. I can only know my experience fully, and I can only speak to my experience fully. And what everybody else does with theirs is their right. But I'm content with how I handle mine.
What is coming next for you? Because I think you're such a fabulous writer, and
Thank you.
I look back to, you know, you telling your mom, "Hey, mom, I wrote a screenplay," and she's like, "You're not going to be a writer. You're an actor. You're an actor. You're not a writer." But you were young and already thinking with that mindset, that writing mindset. Is that something that you want to continue doing?
Yes, I would love to. I've been working on a novel and a collection of essays, and that's been really creatively fun and explorative, and the novel especially is very, very fun because it's not about my life, and I've explored that pretty thoroughly.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to kind of get into another character's point of view and write through, because it's written through her point of view, and sort of write through her experience and to give voice to someone else, even fictional, even a fictional someone else is really fun.
Yeah.
Do you want to focus more on books and that sort of writing, or would you want to venture into, like Fran said, like writing a screenplay or a TV show or anything like that?
I love screenwriting. I would definitely want to venture out into that as well as directing. That's been a really fun experience for me. And I like working. I love working with actors. Mm-hmm. I didn't have much fun doing acting myself. It was just very stressful. But I love communicating with them. I think they tend to be very sensitive, compassionate people, and watching them sort of do what they do and how and observing how differently people do acting and their own approach. It's just so fun to watch.
Yeah. I would assume that you would be great working with actors and, being behind the scenes, because you know what it's like to be treated not the right way. And so you would know how to handle it.
I think that does make a difference. I think I have the experience of being a kid on many different sets and just being, half the size of everyone else, looking up and just kind of wandering to a mark and not really knowing how anything works. So I definitely have that child remember that child point of view. But even if it's not a kid that I'm working with, I just think it's a very vulnerable thing to be acting and putting yourself out there emotionally. And I think actors deserve a lot of respect.
I love that when you get towards the end of this book, it does feel like you are completing a story. You are so young, and it felt like there's so much life has been lived. What do you how do you feel about your mental state now, and how you feel present day?
I appreciate that also. I actually, a couple months ago, it's funny you mentioned that I'm so young, because a couple months ago I was freaking out about turning 30. I couldn't believe it. I booked a therapy session specifically to talk about turning 30 and the anxieties, and they're like, oh my God, what's happening? But it was a relief to be able to have a therapy session about something like turning 30, because I've had therapy sessions that were about life-threatening eating disorders and about grieving my mom and about all these really heavy, intense things that I was sitting across from Aaron, Zooming across from Aaron, and we were able to just laugh about how what a treat it is to be able to have anxiety about something as simple as turning 30. So that's been a real pleasant turnaround, I guess, just the therapeutic experience. But mental health wise, I feel good. I feel sturdy. I feel like I've been able to be really present throughout this, whole experience, and I'm excited to be talking about the things I'm talking about with the people that I'm getting to talk with about these things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited about the connection that's happening. I think that my life has never felt so like in tune with sort of what I want and what I hope, and so that's a really, really cool feeling, for lack of a less eloquent.
Yeah, no,
cool.
I think that there's a lot of great conversation happening around your book in all different ways. And
did I see that did it sell out like on Amazon? Which,
yeah,
that's incredible.
That's
I always thought that was like impossible.
Yeah, I
that
thought there was just like a plethora of books.
Amazon just always had the book.
I thought that Amazon just always had everything.
Exactly.
Like, endlessly. So that's really
cool.
So
that is a testament to how many people love this book.
Really proud of yourself. You should feel really proud of yourself. And I hope that you're giving yourself time to relax as well, while also enjoying all this press. Because like I mentioned, the first thing I said to you was like, it's a lot to be constantly talking about the things that shaped you and were traumatic experiences over and over and over again. And people are asking you the same questions, and you're like, well, I just wrote a book on it, and now I'm reliving it in every interview I do. So I hope that you're also taking the time for yourself.
Thank you. That's what the Disneyland trip yesterday with the nieces was all about. We just had we went on Space Mountain. We went on the Smuggler's Run, the Star Wars ride.
I love it.
It was fun.
That's amazing. Well, Jennette, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us. Everyone can I'm glad my mom died. I don't know if you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, it may be sold out. You got to go to Barnes & Noble. Yeah. You got to drive there and get it.
You can get it. I'm sure, if you're a Kindle reader, you could do that. There's people could read like that way. Did you do audio for this?
I did. Yeah.
Amazing. Which I also think is a great way to read or listen to memoirs, is when the author gets to actually audibly tell their story too. So that's another way you could consume it. But we absolutely recommend. There's some beautiful, scary, dark, funny, awesome stories that are in here that I think everybody will love to read about. So thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
You guys for having me. I really hope to do this in person sometime. You guys are great, and I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, we really hope so.
We would love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.